My name's Chris Culling, and I'm going to be giving a talk today on undiagnosed neurodiversity. If y'all have any trouble hearing me, apologize. But before I get started, I just wanted to give a disclaimer that I'm not a medical professional, and so everything I say is just based on my own lived experience and my opinion. So, and also, I have 2 slides, this one and one for resources at the end. So you won't have to worry about death by PowerPoint. So I do have a couple of notes though, because I am ADHD and I tend to forget things. So I'm currently working as a senior technical success manager with Gigamon on their Threat Insight NDR platform. I've been married for 31 years to a woman who will eventually attain sainthood. My oldest child of 3 adult children. My oldest is, she works in the psychiatric ward of a hospital in DC. My middle is Army veteran who just recently started a cybersecurity program with WGU online. And my youngest is the content manager for Black Hills Information Security. And she gave me permission last night to let the world know that in May, I will be having my first grandchild. So I'm also alcoholic. I've been sober for 4 years, 8 months and 23 days. And I was diagnosed 5 years ago at the age of 48 with severe ADHD, anxiety, and depression. And it's all of that that's basically led up to my talk. So for folks that don't know about neurodiversity, in the early 90s, the term neurotypical was coined by the medical industry. And it meant basically everybody whose brain operated at a normal baseline, what they considered normal. That didn't really address the folks who didn't operate at that baseline. So a couple years later, the term neurodiverse came out to cover everyone else whose brains operate differently from those folks who the medical community considered normal. According to whatever survey you look at, study, there's anywhere from 5 to 25% of folks are considered neurodiverse, either diagnosed or undiagnosed. If we just look at the upper end of the 25%, as I was going through my journey, I started noticing folks in our community that, and it seemed to me that our community was higher than 25% of neurodiverse, whether they're diagnosed or undiagnosed. And it got me to thinking about how I handled being undiagnosed. So I spent the first 48 years of my life not knowing that my brain was different and I was suffering from severe ADHD, anxiety, and depression. And that was a rough 48 years. I did pretty much everything I could do to sabotage myself, sabotage success. And for folks that do deal with ADHD, you know what I'm talking about. And one of the things that as undiagnosed neurodiversity, we tend to self-medicate. And there's all sorts of ways that you can self-medicate. Risky behavior, risky activities, alcohol, drugs, really anything that will help increase the chemicals in your brain so that your executive function, which is impacted by the ADHD, so that those chemicals will for a short period of time, give you that dopamine rush, if you will, to try to make you feel normal or make you feel better than you've been feeling because you just don't know what's going on with you. Executive function controls things like self-control, short-term memory, the ability to go with the flow, flexibility, planning, organizational skills. Very important things that folks need as adults. And if you don't realize that you have a condition, that you're different, you don't know how to deal with it. And so early on, one of the ways I tried to deal with it was through, I tried to destroy my marriage many times over about a 15-year period. I did everything I could to push away the people that I loved, because I didn't feel I could take care of myself. I didn't know what was wrong, but I just knew that there was something wrong, and I couldn't adult. And I didn't want the responsibility many times of having to deal with other people in my life. And too many times I tried to destroy my marriage. And fortunately for me, my future saint of a wife stuck around, and we got through all that. And once I got through that, though, I still didn't know what was wrong with me. So I turned to alcohol. We never had alcohol in the house. We just weren't drinkers. And a number of years ago, one day I brought home a six pack, put it in the fridge. My wife asked me, what's going on? There's beer in the fridge. It's like, yeah, I figured I'd have a cold one after I mowed the lawn or something on the weekend. And then got to be one cold one, and then two cold ones, and then the six pack's gone. And so beer didn't last too long for me, because I was going through it too quick. So I switched to boxed wine. And the really cool thing about boxed wine for somebody who's heading on their way to alcoholism is, if you buy the exact same box of wine and leave it in the same spot in the fridge, then nobody but you knows how quickly you go through that box of wine. And I was going through that box of wine to a point where it just wasn't doing anything for me. I still had this feeling like I was broken. I didn't know what was wrong. And so I eventually switched to liquor. And the turning point came when I started hiding my drinking from my family. I wouldn't go out and drink. I drank at home. I wasn't violent. And all I did was I'd come home from work. I'd sit down on the couch. I'd pour me a drink, and I'd just start to slowly get myself numb every single day. I just watched TV. I ignored my family. And that's the drunk that I was. I was just quiet and just sat there, but I ignored my family. And it finally got to a point where I ended up, as most alcoholics do, by going to the bottom shelf vodka, because you can't smell it, you can't see it, and you can put it in anything. And I was to the point where I was drinking a fifth of vodka every 2 days, basically. And so I wasn't as bad as some folks that I've seen, but it was bad enough for me. And it got to a point where in April of 2017, I woke up. It was a Sunday morning. I went downstairs, and my wife was watching TV, and I just knelt down in front of her and put my head in her lap, and I just started crying. And I probably cried for half an hour. And it was ugly. It was ugly crying. And when I was finally able to start talking and explain to her what had been going on for the last number of years, she was shocked. She had no idea, because I'd hid it so well. Because you learn to hide things like that very well. And the first thing she said to me once we got it together was, you need to get some help. And so I did. And so I found a therapist. I didn't quit drinking. It took a number of months after that before I quit drinking. But I found a therapist and found a psychiatrist. And I finally got a diagnosis for the ADHD and the anxiety and the depression. And so my whole life, I thought I was broken because I didn't know what was wrong with me. I just knew I was different. I read recently that folks that are neurotypical don't go around thinking that they're normal. They just don't. They just know they're normal. They don't think about it. Folks that are neurodivergent know that there's something different going on up here. They don't know what it is, but they know that they're different. As a child, a young adult, even as an adult, you know that there's something different about you. And I knew that my whole life. And most of us end up self-medicating to try to compensate for that. So when I got this diagnosis of ADHD, I immediately thought, great, I'll get some drugs and they'll fix me. Well, I learned out pretty quickly that you don't fix what's going on up here because there's nothing to fix because you're not broken. It's just, you're different. Not only different, but I put beautifully different because as neurodivergents, there are things about us that are special, but it took me a while to figure that out because once I was diagnosed and once I started working with a therapist, not only did I think I was broken, but now I knew why I was broken. I could put a name to what had broken me. And, you'd read things online and stuff about people talking about their superpowers that they have with their neurodiversity. Like with ADHD, we have hyperfocus, and I never considered anything super about anything that I had going on up in here. And after a while, I started to accept the fact that okay, I'm different. I had a therapist that talked about skills and pills. The pills got my brain chemicals up to the point to where I could actually work with a therapist to get those skills to help me manage day to day and learn about things that I used to do, why I used to do them, and to see me getting about ready to do them again, and to know that I don't have to do that. I can stop and take a step back now that I have the medication to help me take that split second to stop and think instead of just reacting, because my self-control has gone up, because my executive functions have gone up because of the medication. It's not perfect. There's still a delta between me and normal that I just have to work on, that I just have to learn those skills. And the whole entire reason for this talk and for everything that I've said right now is because I started looking through our community and seeing how many folks were diagnosed neurodivergence. And neurodiversity covers a whole spectrum: autism, ADHD, OCD, dyslexia, bipolar disorder, basically anything that where our brain operates differently from that, what they consider that baseline normal. And it started occurring to me that a lot of the folks in our community don't realize that they have something going on up there, or they know it, but they're not doing anything about it. And seeing how alcohol is so prevalent in InfoSec, I started thinking in my own experience, how I was self-medicating my undiagnosed neurodiversity. I wonder if other folks in our community are doing the same thing. And so I put this talk together to bring an awareness to folks. Number one, that if you think there's something different about you, about what goes on up here, if you've thought this your whole life, which usually is the case, then there probably is something different. And you should consider either going online and taking some, there's tests for everything online. They're not official, but they can give you a general idea as to whether or not you're close to some type of neurodiversity. And then go and see a therapist, and just to find out if there might be something going on that you can get some help with. Medication is not a bad thing. I know a lot of folks are scared to death of taking one more pill for something. I take pills for anxiety and depression. I'm working on trying to get those doses lowered because I'm learning skills to deal with anxiety and depression. With my ADHD, I'm maxed out, and I'm not going to drop that at all because I need those chemicals working up in my brain so I can do everything else. But the folks in the community, and I tweet a lot about my mental health and about my alcoholism, just so that other folks know that they're not alone, so that You know, that they might see something in something that I say and go, oh, that reminds me of something I did the other day, or, you know, and ask for help. And if anybody is in that boat, or if anybody knows anybody who's possibly neurodivergent but doesn't accept it or doesn't realize it, you know, finding a good therapist is the best first step. But not just any therapist, because they're not created equal. You have to find somebody who specifically says, I work with people with neurodiversities, with ADHD, with autism. Those folks know what's going on and they empathize. I've had folks tell me that were adults that were diagnosed with ADHD late in life, like I was. The doctor told them, yeah, you have ADHD, but you've learned to cope with it as an adult, so you're good to go. And it's like, no, that's not how it works, because we don't learn how to cope with it. We develop coping mechanisms through our whole life in order to appear normal, masks that we put on, you know, the things we try to do so that others don't think that we're different, you know, but that takes a toll on you mentally and physically and emotionally. And so nobody actually copes with it unless you're really working with somebody with medication and with therapy on how to actually deal with things that come up. I see a therapist once a week, whether I think I need to or not, because I find out every week that I did need to. And the second point that I want to make very clear is that we're not broken. You know, I know a lot of folks don't want to go get that diagnosis because they don't want that label, because they associate that label with being broken, with being not normal. And that's not the case. We're different. And that's a big distinction. That took me a long time to understand. But once you understand that you're different and not broken, then you can start working with those differences that you have. You can learn how to harness that ability to hyperfocus and use it for good. You'll still end up going till the day before that project's due and spending 24 hours awake doing it, but you'll get it done, and you'll hate yourself afterwards because you'll be so tired. But you will have accomplished it. You won't have gone to sleep at night because you're so hyper-focused on getting that done that when you do get it done, you know, and that's a rush too. It's a dopamine rush when you're doing that. But when you know that that's what you do, then you can plan better. You can plan out to where, okay, maybe I'll do a little hyper-focus today, and then I'll do it next week, and then the week after, until I get this project done, instead of doing it every day, because, you know, I don't like to work on some long-term project every day. And the other reason a lot of folks don't like to talk about or get a diagnosis is because they're afraid of their work situation. They're afraid that if their supervisor knew that they were autistic or ADHD or had OCD or anything, that something negative was going to happen to them at work. While that's illegal, obviously it does happen. And so another piece of this is for supervisors and managers of folks to create an environment within your section, your department, your company, of being able to freely talk about mental health issues. As a supervisor, if you do have any type of mental health issues that you deal with, is talking openly to your subordinates and letting them know, this is what I struggle with. This is a safe place. If any of you struggle with anything, feel free to let me know. Nothing negative is going to happen to you. I will work with you to reach your full potential. There was a company, and I can't remember who it was, about 10 years ago. They specifically went out and hired a number of autistic folks specifically to work same job that everyone else was doing in the company. And they found out over a period of time that the autistic folks produced 110 to 140% more than their coworkers. And the point being is that having a neurodiverse condition is not a negative. It's actually a positive. Some of the smartest folks that have ever lived had something going on up here that was different than your normal individual walking the streets. And so if you create an environment where folks are willing to talk about their mental health issues, then you can work with them to help them work in such a way that optimizes their strengths. A lot of folks with ADHD, we are not morning people, just based on our brain chemistry. We're not. But we can work late in the night without any problems. And if you work from home, and if you're a supervisor and you can let your folks pick their schedule that's more conducive to them getting stuff done, then it's going to help them tremendously. A lot of neurotypical or neurodivergent folks don't work well in an office cubicle 9-to-5 setting, just because of any sensory issues that a lot of folks have, audio, visual, lights that bother them, the fact that they may need to get up every 5 or 10, not 5 or 10 minutes, but 15, 20, 30 minutes maybe, and just take a 5-minute mental health break. The point is making a safe space for the folks that work for you, understanding what they need to work best, asking them what can you what can I do for you to help you, and giving them the ability to ask for a mental health day off with no questions asked. That's been very important for me. I work for Gigamon now, and I've been there for about 5 months. And fortunately, being on the customer success side, they're already tuned to their people. But my manager and my whole team, I mean, the first thing I told everybody when I was hiring, when I was going through the hiring process, was that I have ADHD, anxiety, and depression, and I'm an alcoholic. Is that an issue? And it wasn't an issue for any of them. And if it was, I wouldn't want to work for them. And so the environment is such that I can just tell my boss, I can just wake up in the morning and say, I can't do today. And he knows exactly what I mean. And he's like, anything I can do for you, let me know. We'll see you tomorrow. And that is so refreshing and so freeing, because tomorrow I'm going to be so much better than had I worked today and had to suffer through it and then work tomorrow and have to continue to suffer through whatever it was I was dealing with at the time. So this is, there's so many facets to this, but it comes down to basically just knowing that if you think that there's something going on with your up in here, to go and find out. That's an important thing. Just finding out doesn't obligate you to anything. You don't want medication, there's other ways to work around it. And if you're self-medicating, ask yourself, why am I doing this to myself? You might not even realize that you're self-medicating. I didn't realize I was self-medicating when I was drinking, or when I was trying to destroy my marriage, or when I was trying to do any other things that I've done that were stupid in my first 48 years of my life. But ask yourself, why am I self-medicating? And try to find out what the underlying reason might be. And then the third part of it is that's probably even more important, is just having, being a supervisor and being aware of the mental health state of your people. Learning more about what neurodiversity is, about how it looks, how it plays out, how folks present the different things that could point to them being part of the neurodiverse community, and being open enough to talk to them, to let them know it's a safe space for them to open up about what they're dealing with. So before I finish and we get to some questions, in Alcoholics Anonymous, as we go through and for subsequent months to begin with, and then years of sobriety, they give us a coins to mark for ourselves personally. So this is my 4-year coin, and I carry this with me just to remind myself, why, it's a physical reminder for why I'm staying sober. We went to DEF CON and Black Hat as a company to work Black Hat, and I was fine until about the last day before DEF CON was over, and I was starting to feel that all the alcohol that had been around me for that whole week, it was starting to get to me. And one of my coworkers, who knows I'm alcoholic, asked me, what's wrong? And I told him, I really want to drink right now. And they're like, is there anything I can do to help you? And I'm like, no. And just the act of telling somebody that I wanted that drink was enough to curb that desire for that drink. And so that's what this coin does when there's no one around to talk to. And for newcomers to Alcoholics Anonymous, they have a 24-hour coin that they offer to the new folks. After they've, once they've been sober for 24 hours, they could pick this up as they try to get to their month coin, and 2-month coin, and 3-month coin. And this is I've got a number of these, and these can be used for anything apart from alcohol that you're just trying to get through 24 hours. You're just trying to get to that next day. It's got the Serenity Prayer on the back, and I've got a number of these. If anybody wants one, just to help you get through something where you just need to get to that next day. We have this trick in AA where if you want to drink, you just tell yourself that you'll have a drink tomorrow, and then tomorrow you tell yourself you'll have a drink tomorrow, and tomorrow never comes for that drink, and you just end up not having that drink. And it's the same thing, you just make it to tomorrow, then I can make it to the next day. So that's my talk. I've got like 10 minutes left. If anybody has any questions, what I've done on some previous talks is, if there are questions, other folks that have information that can contribute to the answer to that question, please chime in, because that's been very helpful for me too. I've learned something from every talk I've given. But I thank you for coming to my talk, and if there's any questions, I'll take them now. And yep.
I think it's one of the biggest about
Sure. That probably that they're going to be hard to deal with as a supervisor, and that they're not going to be as productive a member of the team. And I mean, I would think that would, for me, that's the top ones, and that's why a lot of people don't like to bring that up, because they know that's how people think. The converse of that is understanding them and working to their strengths as much as possible. But yeah, no, I think that's because neurotypical folk don't generally take the time to understand neurodiversity, and so for them it's just, it's the stereotypical autistic kid on the movies that they see, who can play piano like nobody else, but who can't function otherwise. And that's why they call it the autism spectrum, because it's and it used to be a straight line. Now it's a circle, because there's so many different components within autism that different autistics have different strengths and weaknesses in, that they've gotten rid of the whole like straight line spectrum. It's a circle now, and you fall somewhere within autism. And yeah, that's what I say. So.
Obviously, you're not really professional experience. You mentioned earlier the parent being diagnosed.
Yes.
Seek help because of that.
Yep.
Challenge
Yep. Yep.
Because any neuron residence for ADHD or score.
Yeah.
So my question is, what would you say to those people? Or adverse, what would you say to someone that is interacting with someone?
So there's a difference between, yes. Oh, sure. So the question was basically for folks who might suspect that they're ADHD in this case. Let's just use that as an example. But because of other reasons inside their life, they don't want to get that diagnosis or be on that medication. Whether it's because they can't work certain equipment, they can't get a pilot license, for example, if you're on certain medication, I guess. So to that, I would say that getting a diagnosis is different than being on medication. Getting the diagnosis is the important piece, because then you know how to work with a therapist. Then you know how to do more research on your own to understand what that particular neurodivergent condition means for you. And there are also non-medicinal things that you can do, exercise, eating healthily, just changing routines. There are a lot of things that don't involve medication. The one thing about medication for ADHD is that it increases your executive function abilities. But if you know what's going on with you and you can learn to compensate for that through other means besides medication, I think getting the diagnosis first is the important thing, and then you can go from there. So, yes. Thank you. Mhm. Yep. Yep. Sure. Sure. So a lot of the autistic folks that I've come across are self-diagnosed autists. They've done the exact same thing you've done. They've read, they've researched. They know, based off of everything in their life, they know they're autistic, and so they claim that they're autistic. And probably half to 3/4 of the autistic community are self-diagnosed autistic. The most important thing is understanding where you are. And so if you go to, and if you seek a therapist to help, because skills is a big part of it, skills and pills. If you don't want to deal, and there's no pills that you can take for autism, it's skills. It's learning how to live with what you've been dealt. And so, but the most important thing is finding somebody who specifically says, I work with folks with autism or ADHD, because they're the ones that are going to understand you. But that's where I'd go with that. But knowing yourself, I've taken those tests too, and I think I might be slightly autistic as well. It doesn't really matter what matters is if you know that there's certain things that you do in your life, and you can catch yourself doing those, and you can adjust accordingly, or you can just decide you don't care and just be yourself and let everybody deal with you. So. Yeah, yeah, sure. Yes. That's true. Yeah, no, it is very undiagnosed in women because of the stereotypes that are given to women and the patriarchal society that we live in. Yes, sir.
I just wanted to have those tests, online tests, some of those tests and stuff. So, because they're not free. So if you're worried about the privacy of that information, you should evaluate.
That's true. And I've only got like 2 minutes left, but this is my second slide. I just remembered to bring it up. Just a couple of resources. Neurodiversityhub.org is really good. In Psychology Today, their Find a Therapist. You can get bios on all the therapists and their specialties, and they've been vetted by Psychology Today. So that's just a great place to find therapists. And on Twitter, specifically for neurodiversity, but also it extends out to, for ADHD. These 4 folks here, and this hashtag neurodiverse squad, and there's a community as well. They put out some really good content that just really give you good understanding as to what they deal with. So, oh, wow. No, no. I've forgotten to take my medicine, and I know how it feels. So I prefer not to go off of it. So if you want to go off your meds, I would talk to your doctor and just let them know you want to taper down or you want to try, do something. But just going cold turkey off of a med that affects your brain isn't a great idea. Yes. Well, oh, yeah. So there are some doctors, if like your primary care manager, who will, if you tell them, you think you're ADHD, if they've worked with you for a long time, they might start you on a very low dose of an ADHD medication. The way I did it was I saw a psychiatrist who sent me to a psychologist. I did the battery of tests, and the psychologist reported back to the psychiatrist, and the psychiatrist gives me my meds. So there's different ways to do it, but yeah. And that's all the time that I have. So I thank you all so much for coming to my talk. Okay.